Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another one of our Lunch and Learn sessions. Thank you so much for joining us today, and hope you've all had a good holiday and a good start of the new year. Today we have with us Jon O'Donnell from the DWP. He'll be talking to us about quite a few things around accessibility. So before we get started, I'd just like to say hello to everyone. And if you have any questions or comments, please remember that you put them in the chat. And if you'd like to say hello, please say hi in the chat, and you can tell us a little bit about who you are or what you'd like to get in terms of information or uh, topics that you'd like to discuss during the session. Now, I'd also like to quickly remind everyone that for the time being, you may not be able to unmute yourselves or turn on your cameras, just so that the session is not interrupted. And again, once again, if you've got any questions, please leave them in the chat, or you can tag or direct them either at me or to Jon directly, and we'll pick them up during regular intervals during the session. Now, as some of you may know, Purple Bear Training offers a range of training solutions, including apprenticeship programs that some of you are actually on. And of course, we have a new program that we're currently working on, the AI and Automation Practitioner Program. You'll probably hear about it a little more later this week. And we also do boot camps and tailored programs for individuals that are outside of apprenticeships on standard. Now, I'm just going to give it one more minute because I think we have two more people in the waiting room before letting people in. Yeah, there we go. Fantastic. And I'm going to hand over to you, Jon. Over to you. Yeah, have a good one. And that's about it.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jon O'Donnell. I'm from the Department of Work and Pensions, and I'm a Senior Accessibility Specialist. So if you bear with me, I'm just going to bring up my presentation. And if you can just confirm that that is in view, I'd be very grateful.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Marvelous. So I'm Jon O'Donnell. I lead on document accessibility in DWP, and I've been very kindly invited along to talk to you today about what we do in DWP, how we do it, and to tell you a little bit about myself as well. So first of all, about me. I am a disabled person with an upper limb disability. My specific issues are nerve damage in both median nerves, affecting dexterity and grip perception. If you ever see me drop a cup of coffee, that's because of that, because I don't know I'm actually gripping the mug. An artificial joint in my left elbow, affecting the ability to straighten the arm, causing issues with lifting and pain. So I generally deal with pain levels in between 5 and 7 on a daily basis. Sometimes that can increase, and sometimes on good days it can be a lot less. So pain is a constant for me. My elbow joint will sometimes lock, and I will get frequent hand cramps and painful finger seizures, which is quite painful. I use assistive software when symptoms are at their worst, but whenever I can, I try not to use it because not everything works well with assistive software. So, accessibility and me. I had my accident in 2011, and I spent 3 years working one-handed until I received voice recognition software in 2014, and I received Dragon. I learned very, very quickly that my software was nearly useless in terms of interacting with DWP products, documents, and our intranet, as accessibility was not a requirement. The public sector body's accessibility regulations didn't come in until 2018. After that time, I led the review into communications with blind and partially sighted customers from 2014 to 2016. And I also began a personal campaign to improve document accessibility in DWP in 2015, and I designed how-to guides, ran training sessions, and promoted inclusion. At the end of 2022, I saw a job for a senior accessibility specialist and was successful. And this has enabled me to work on accessibility full-time, a role that I absolutely love. And you will probably find out, if you get to know me a bit more, that it's an absolute passion of mine. Tackling document inaccessibility. After a few months in my new role, it was clear that data on document accessibility in my department was scarce, so I needed better insight. So I decided to launch the 6-monthly document accessibility survey in July of 2023. The sixth survey in that series has just been completed, and this is targeted at disabled colleagues and assistive software users to share their experiences. And in DWP, 1 in 4 people have a health condition that affects their day-to-day life. And we have over 3,000 assistive software users. Now, we have a total staff headcount of about 94,000. So you can see document accessibility is pretty critical to a large group within DWP. The first survey gave me insights I needed to target change, and subsequent surveys have shown the impact of that change, but also helped me to target other areas as I progress through the accessibility challenge in DWP. One of the key things I noted was that we had no policy on document accessibility. So the policy, if there isn't a policy, it is very hard to encourage people to produce accessible content. So from my point of view, this had to change. So I wrote and published the Digital Document Accessibility Policy in July 2024, the first in any government department in the UK. This is underpinned with a process to report inaccessible content and has an escalation procedure to take unresolved issues to senior directors. So if somebody does not make their content accessible within a set time period, then I can obviously flag that to our digital directors. Training. I also identified that there was a complete lack of training in terms of how do you actually create an accessible Word document, PowerPoint document, or Excel spreadsheet. So I then went about writing 3 courses and have published these courses on civil service learning, which has a cohort of up to 600,000 users. These are essential courses because it teaches people how to, for example, what should be in an accessible Word document, what you should not use. So, for example, headings, correctly formatted text, descriptive links, alt text for images. A lot of this basic training just did not exist. So although we had the policy, we needed something that was going to actually help people comply with the policy. So far, over 4,000 people have completed these courses, but obviously we are trying to encourage more and more civil servants across all government departments to complete these, to give them the basic skills they need to make accessible content. Now, this is essential for us as DWP because obviously we produce documents, training, forms. All of these are critical for the customers that we serve, and we serve around 20 million people every single year in some form, and probably have 2 to 3 customer contact points with each customer during that cycle. So it's essential that the communications that we issue to them in terms of letters or through website messaging or through any other format is accessible to them. Engaging and engagement. Engaging people with accessibility is a huge challenge. So I use a combination of virtual and personalized training sessions and surveys, as mentioned before, to gauge feedback and results. I also designed and piloted the virtual accessibility escape rooms in November of last year, with the questions based on the courses I had published on civil service learning, i.e. if you completed the courses, then you should do well in the escape rooms. This was a huge success, an even greater success than we even expected. We had over 40 teams apply to compete. 25 teams were accepted. Some were after the deadline. Over 300 course completions and a huge jump in the number of visitors to my document accessibility training web pages in DWP. Feedback was it was a fun, engaging and competitive and different, and people really engaged with the concept of document accessibility as a result. Some of the actual virtual rooms, the engagement, the conversations that were taking place between the team members over what was the correct answer was highly motivational to watch. And we are going to be sharing that. And we will also be launching this across the whole civil service this year. Over 70 organisations have been in contact and want to borrow the concept. And tomorrow we're actually doing a sharing session with about 15 different universities, 30 other government departments for people all across the globe to share the content and the method of virtual accessibility escape rooms. So escape rooms, can you escape? So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to share a different slide deck, and I'm going to show you the accessibility escape rooms and give you a flavour of what they're all about. So please bear with me 1 second. So this is the virtual escape room. I'm just going to put it into reading mode. Accessibility escape rooms, this was the Apollo version. Can you make it back to Earth? So what we're going to do is I'm just going to run you through how we actually run this to give you a flavour of what accessibility escape rooms actually are. So the rules for these escape rooms was allocate a team member to be your captain, and they were required to give the group's final answer. You cannot answer the question until all the question and options are read aloud. That's an accessibility requirement. If you get a question wrong, you go all the way back to the beginning, and you must wait until all the questions and options have been read aloud again before answering. You'll be given your time, but you won't know if you progress to the finals until all the teams have competed. It is a timed event, so every second counts, and the final was held on the 3rd of December. So this is how it actually was. So we would then read out this entire slide, and this one was the Apollo version of the escape rooms. And I'm just going to whiz through to a couple of slides to give you a flavour of the type of questions that we were asking. So without warning, a huge explosion or a junior crew around, and you've now got to answer this key question. In Microsoft Excel, should you use colour on its own to convey a value's trend direction? If you were thinking, well, the answer clearly must be no. Well done, you've stopped the spin. Will you still get to the moon? So this is how it basically ran. They had to answer each question. You stop the spin, but the batteries are dying. You need to turn off the heaters to save power. Text boxes in Word can be accessed by all assistive software. True or false? And of course, if you know the answer to this, you would probably say false, which is absolutely correct. You cannot actually access text boxes in Word. They're not accessible. So that gives you a flavour of what accessibility escape rooms actually are. We had 3 rounds, and there were 8 questions in the first 2 rounds, and then there was a final where there were 12 questions. And at each level, it got more and more difficult. So the aim was to engage people in a more fun way with accessibility and help them realise some of the, should we say, bad practices that they had been using in the past were extremely difficult for their assistive software colleagues or those with disabilities. So it promoted the correct formatting of text and all the key principles of what accessible documents truly are. So I'm just going to get my PowerPoint back open, and then I should reshare it, and then we'll continue. So please bear with me. I'm more used to Teams than I am Zoom. So can you just confirm that I'm now resharing?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Thank you. I will just whiz through. So my top tips for engagement and engagement activities: to get people to buy into accessible design or universal design, a personal connection always works well. So whenever I'm working with a new group, I will often ask, do they have any elderly relatives or a relative or a friend with a disability? And then I usually engage with them around what they know about that person, what kind of barriers does that person have? And then I talk to them about, okay, let's talk about the real world. Most NHS letters come in a PDF format electronically that you have to download. If you want to buy a car, most of those documents are online documents that people have to work through. And of course, this presents unique barriers for disabled people, either just in their daily living, but also challenges when they're coming to work or to access critical services. We know that the disability employment gap actually begins much earlier than people think, which begins way back in early education. This is where education materials are exclusive. They are not designed to be accessible, and the people who are then using those materials are not aware of accessibility requirements or accessibility need. So this leads to, that's where the educational gap causes a problem engage in, and then obviously acquiring new qualifications. This then obviously translates into the workplace because it takes people longer to get qualifications, or they feel excluded from certain qualifications. And this then leads to the employment gap, which we know is about 28% between disabled and non-disabled. So documents play a critical role in accessibility. And of course, they're probably the less well-known, or shall we say, less favoured part of the global accessibility agenda, because web takes such a high amount of the precedence over everything else. Now, of course, web is important, but on most websites, probably 90% of websites, there's downloadable content. And of course, that content very rarely is accessible. So when I'm working with a new group, I often focus on, is there a personal connection that I can hook into? Is there some kind of heartstring that I can get them to be passionate about getting this right? I also do a lot of research around what is the most common form. And we do know that vision and hearing loss are the two most common forms of disability. So either vision in terms of color processing, about 3 million people in the UK have a color processing disorder, or we call this color blindness. And obviously red, green are the most common. But hearing impairment and vision impairment tends to come to all of us. So actually what we're doing is a little bit self-serving. We're making our future lives a little bit better. And that's what I'm also trying to get across, is you're actually doing this for yourself, and you're doing it for your future self. So this is something that's rather self-serving. So it's not for somebody you don't know, it's actually for you. So I always work on that future basis, that vision and hearing loss are the most common, and they come with age. And if you look at some of the demographic data, if you look at Office of National Statistics data and other data sources from other very reputable charities, you will actually pick up that this is a really quite a common thing. So we're actually working to make our older and retirement lives that much more accessible. Personal motivation and taking ownership of accessible content makes a huge difference. And I generally find once you manage to get some kind of hook or buy-in, or getting them to understand that this is actually in their own interests, will actually help you get them to take on and take ownership of some of their content. The uncomfortable truth. When the fun learning does not work, and who do you know in the real world does not gain traction, what can you try next? Well, I work a lot on live demonstrations. So if I'm working with a team who's asked for my advice on a particular product that they want to roll out, I will generally use some assistive software. So I might use JAWS, I might use Dragon, I might use voice recognition or anything else, and I will actually demonstrate their product back to them. So using a screen reader is a really good one to use with documents, because I'm just going to play this and show you how this document comes across to somebody who is blind. So I let them their document and I would play it to them. And generally speaking, the worst ones that usually come out are PowerPoint and reading order. It's such a simple thing to fix, but it's the most common thing that isn't fixed, is the reading order of a PowerPoint product. So when I play their PowerPoint product back to them and they listen to it, and I'm going to use a word that some of you may have heard in the past, gobbledygook, which means it absolutely makes no sense whatsoever because the reading order is out of alignment. So the first thing read might be the last thing they added. The thing to remember with PowerPoint is that creating a PowerPoint is usually a creative process. It might go through a number of reviews, it might go to a few colleagues for opinions. But of course, every time it goes through that, the reading order might just tweak, because somebody might add something in, say, oh, it'd be really good if you put this in or that in. And of course, by the end, when you've got a signed off product, the last thing you need to check is reading order, because otherwise, for everybody who uses a screen reader, it will not make any sense at all. There's no logical sequence to the content. So it's really important that reading order or logical sequence is checked before any PowerPoint is shared. Letting them hear their product is very powerful. watching their faces when they realize it doesn't make sense really sinks it home, brings it home to them that this isn't what we intended, and it makes them own it. And then when you show them how simple it is to fix, getting them to buy into that and the realization of how easy this could actually be, that really helps. Demonstrating the navigation issues and how somebody might navigate through a Word document or navigate through an Excel spreadsheet. When you show them through the tab and the arrow button how difficult it actually is to navigate through something, and that how important, for example, using the correct styles and headers within Word are, so that somebody who's using Dragon might say next header, or actually somebody might actually open it up and actually navigate through using a screen reader and go to the content they want. The key thing to, at the end of the day, is once you show them it with assistive software, you can then ask them if they understood the product that they produced. Based on the assistive software use, could they understand it? Could they gain the key information out of that product? And this tends to be a very powerful way of communicating that accessibility hasn't really been thought of while they were designing their content. So bear with me just one second. Surveys. I'm a big fan of surveys. They're an essential tool for any accessibility specialist or any organization who wants to know about how they're actually doing in terms of accessibility. But it's really critical in providing evidence to people who are either managing change or project managers to provide data. Data is essential to help them understand the demographics that they're serving, and it helps you build, for example, you can build an actual persona of common accessibility requirements that are needed. So you can actually give them a persona of somebody who uses assistive software, how they would interact with their products, and how they would interact with the tools. So this is actually really quite essential. You can use, there's lots of charities who produce lots of useful data, but understanding your own organization and the people that you're working for is critical. It's a big part of anything you need to do, because this is your audience. This is the people you are either trying to sell to, or you're trying to serve, or you're trying to educate. So understanding your audience is really important. I use a lot of data from the Office of National Statistics. You can use or design your own surveys. Microsoft Forms is very easy to use, very easy to make your own surveys, and also is accessible. But you can also use other surveys such as WebAIM, produce a number of reports on accessibility and the common fails in accessibility, for example, with web. So I would urge everybody to really understand your customer base. So surveys, finding research, getting that information, keeping it up to date will really help you in winning some critical arguments when you're looking for change in the way a product has been designed, or the way the product works. Bear with me, sorry. Language is important. The one thing I've learned as an accessibility specialist, if you just hit people over the head with a baseball bat and you must do it, it doesn't actually resonate. It doesn't actually get people as allies. So simply saying you have to, or it's the law, i.e. under the public sector body's accessibility regulations and the Equality Act, these tend to be negative ways of getting people to perform. I would only really use those in extreme circumstances. So don't start with that. So I've got a few suggestions for you as an audience, and you may have used these all before yourself. So if I'm teaching anybody to suck eggs, I apologize. But I tend to use, that is a really good so far. Can I offer you some tips to help you reach your whole audience? So when they realize, oh, I might be excluding some of my audience, you can say, I'll give you some tips about how we can improve it. I've also used, I'm impressed, you've clearly got some good knowledge here. Could I offer a few minor suggestions on universal design? So it could be around text formatting. It could be about increasing the line spacing, left alignment. It could be all that. That link would be really good if it actually told somebody where they were going. So these are simple things, and it's about using soft language to get people to come on board with you, what you want them to do. And for example, no web designer or document designer ever wants to go out there and produce a really rubbish product. They don't want to do it. And they generally will go for the visual outlook of a product because obviously they want to impress. They want people to think, wow, that's really good and everything else. So maybe you start with that language. Wow, this looks like a great product. I pamper their ego a little bit. Could I show you how it works with a screamy or voice control? So this is a great way of saying, giving you the in. This is a great product. Could I show you something? So language is really important. And I've found that softer language, softer introductions to accessibility, especially when somebody's been working on a product for 2 years and then all of a sudden you're just about to tear it apart. What you need to try and do is reassure them that, hey, the product is good, but maybe we just need to tweak the color palette, or maybe we just need to tweak the logical sequence a bit, or let's just space that text out a bit better so it's a bit more readable. Little things that we can then encourage them to do. But generally what I find with accessibility, it's kind of like riding a bike or learning to swim. It's a skill that's very hard to forget. So once you've actually taught somebody about a descriptive link, about alt text, about text format, they tend to remember that every time they go and design something else. So you want them to be an ally. You want them to keep coming back to you. If you beat them over the head with a big stick every time they come and talk to you, they're going to not come and talk to you. So you want them to think, Jon's a great bloke. He really helps me out. He's always impressed by what I do. And he always helps me produce something that's more accessible. So it's about building allies, building relationships. The more relationships you build, the more and bigger, greater impact you can have. And the more likely people are to do it. My other piece of advice is never give up. Accessibility is a very new profession, and it takes time to build momentum. So when you're first starting out in accessibility, it may feel like you are banging your head on a brick wall, you're getting no progress, nobody's listening. It's about building relationships, like I mentioned before. It's about building your reputation, not for being somebody who's negative, who's always critical, but you're actually trying to put your arm around someone's shoulder and say, this is great, but if we could just tweak this, or we could just change that. By building your network and building your allies, you will have much greater impact than just simply quoting legislation or web content accessibility guidelines or anything like that. But I'd also advise you to build a support network, build a network of colleagues. I work with a number of senior accessibility specialists across all government departments and in the private sector. I reach out and I actually use them as sounding boards, or I ask them to come and observe some of my presentations and give me tips and help. This is a really good thing to do because it helps build your experience, it helps build your approach and build your style of what kind of accessibility specialist you're going to be and how you're going to impact. So seek out colleagues in the field. Join professional groups on LinkedIn. If you're not a member of International Association of Accessibility Professionals, see if you can get your organization to join it, or you can join it. LinkedIn, you can go out and reach out to lots of other accessibility professionals. There's the Document Accessibility in the Public Sector group, which I co-chair. There's the Champions of Accessibility Network, which you can also join. So I actively encourage you to build your network, build your colleagues, build your support group, because they will have also been through a number of the challenges that you may be facing or about to face in your profession. They can offer assistance, they can offer advice, and when it sometimes feels like you're making no progress, they would have been there too. So try not to let frustration or a lack of progress initially in your first year or two put you off. Accessibility is essential. Accessibility makes a difference. It changes people's lives. And if we continue to fight the good fight, but do it in a way without people realizing that we're actually helping them to build a better world, then we will achieve real change. AI, artificial intelligence, is not the solution, but it is a really good tool. It is an excellent product to speed up some of the processes that we sometimes might do. So I use Copilot and I use other AI tools sometimes to help me move my work along quicker. I always have to check it though, because if you ask Copilot for how do I do an accessible document, the one thing you have to bear in mind is quite often AI will search the web for the information. And we know that the information on the web is not always accurate. So you always have to quality check what AI does, but it's a really good product that can help you speed things along, will save you time, will help you deliver things quicker. But don't completely rely on it. It's just a tool. It only works basically on the information or the questions that you present it. And of course, it does base a lot of its feedback on the web. And of course, as mentioned, the stuff on the web is just not fully either correct or accessible itself. Which brings me nicely to questions. So I've whizzed through that a lot quicker than I thought I would. But what we can do is take questions, and I'm here for a while, so feel free to ask anything you want to know about DWP and what we do.
We did go through those a little quickly today. Thanks, John. I'm
Yes,
just going
quite
to
all right.
I'm just going to enable the unmute options. There you go. And you should also be able to turn on your cameras if required. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. I have a few questions already. I'm going to go through them. Well, one of them is asking if the recording can be shared. Yes, of course, the recording will be shared. Next question is it possible to have a list of the support networks that John has suggested, please?
I'm more than happy to put together a list of links for you, and I'll send them to you on email for you to share.
Great. All right, Charlotte, I think that answers your question. Lucy asks, well, she says it's astounding how many checks you have to do for AI to get it right.
Said AI is not 100% accurate, and as long as you accept that that's the case with AI, and you accept it is just a tool. I know we're in a world where everyone thinks AI is going to answer all the problems, and AI can and does sometimes sum things up really, really helpfully, and sometimes can help summarize reports and summarize questions or provide useful answers. But it is just like with anything, it's just like your mouse, it's just like your software, it's a tool. But if you try and rely on it to do everything for you and expect it to be accurate, you're going to get a little bit unstuck.
Okay, good. Liz has asked the question. Would you say the DWP is fully accessible now?
DWP is on a journey, quite simply. We serve over 20 million customers, as I said, 3 or 4 times a year in each individual contact. We manage a budget of over 140 billion pounds of benefits. We have 94,000 staff. We have over 320 different computer systems that we maintain and use to deliver those benefits. And we have around 42 million documents that we have in associated with either claims or customers or advice or guidance and training. So it's a journey. We are working towards full compliance. We have a dedicated accessibility team. We have written designated courses, and we are working through that. But accessibility isn't done, if that makes sense. Accessibility is a living, breathing thing that has to go through everything and everything we do. And even if we get to 100% compliance on every single document and every single system, it's not going to end there. We still have to continually monitor and maintain. Products go through iterations and project life cycles, and at each point of that, the accessibility has to be tested and everything else. So it's not a once and done exercise. But we have made huge improvements. You know, in document accessibility, we're about 60% compliant in our surveys 2 years ago. We're now at 80% compliance. So we're getting there. But when you've got 94,000 potential document creators, and you're trying to train 94,000 people, it's very difficult to get to everybody and make sure every product is accessible. However, we're making sure that all of our training is accessible, and we're raising the awareness. So, for example, the accessibility escape rooms, a great way to raise awareness of these courses, of this activity, and why it's important. But are we there yet? No, but we are getting there, and we're probably the furthest ahead of any government department, and we're probably one of the best resourced to do it as well. Hope that answers your question.
That was a good answer. I think that does answer the question. And I think it's a fair assessment of where we're at versus where we want to go. So that's good. I think more organizations need to have that kind of reflection and set expectations before we can move forward. So that's good.
We're one of the few organisations. We monitor every single system for accessibility. We identify what the issues are, and then we work with every single product and project team on every single system about how it can be iterated and be even better every single time. We're probably the only government department that actually does surveys of all of our staff and actually ask them about product accessibility. We ask them to flag anything that's not accessible. We have a reporting system that, because we have 42 million documents, there's no way I can personally remediate 42 million documents. So I target the high use ones, and then obviously we get those remediated. So things like recruitment or training products or guidance products, they're top of the list to be made accessible.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Good. Next, Matt says another good way to win hearts and minds is to point out the ways in which accessible content is better for all users.
Yeah, you may have picked up on the word that I put in the presentation, which was universal. Now, I try and move away from saying accessible now, and I say universal design. So we're talking about universal design principles, which means what I found is correctly formatted text that is left aligned, that is 1.5 line space, that's at least 12 points for Word and 18 points for PowerPoint. That actually benefits everyone. That makes it easier for all of us to read, and it reduces eye strain. It reduces the amount of mental and cognitive load you have trying to read a product. So when I'm talking about universal design, I'm telling people, look, I find this easier to read because it's not making my eye strain. I'm not having to change the zoom levels. I can just read the content without having to work harder. So it's a universal design principle. So there's certain things that aren't universal design. For example, alt text, that's a critical accessibility element. But text formatting, the use of colors, that is universal design. So trying to focus on the universal design features, which will tick about 80% of the accessibility requirements, is a good way of talking rather than just talking accessibility. Talk universal design. I hope that answers your question, Matt.
Alex has the next question. He asks, can you talk some more about on the accessible document policy? How did it go down initially, especially with senior leaders? Also, is it possible to have a copy, please? He's right there. I think he wants to follow up on that question.
No problem. Well, pretty soon our accessibility policy is going to be on our external website, because we're updating that at the moment. It's a generic one that's on all government websites, but we're looking to update ours to actually show our actual accessibility policy. There's a number of hoops we have to jump through because it's obviously a public sector accessible website, that one. But first of all, how did it go down? Actually, it was quite easy because as I mentioned before, because I had the data and I used the surveys to produce the data, which gave me the evidence to show why we needed a document accessibility policy. When we're talking 2 out of 5 disabled colleagues being unable to partake in training, unable to get the communication products that everyone else had access to, unable to complete part of their job roles because the products weren't accessible. This is why data is very important to winning arguments, giving them the research, giving them the information. But what I also did in those surveys was I asked people for their impact on them of not being able to do something. So if they weren't able to take part in that training, what was the impact on them and the impact on their role and how they overcome it? They had to ask colleagues for help. So then I could highlight the productivity drain, the productivity loss that we were experiencing because these documents weren't accessible. These are all the key arguments that I used to persuade my directors in digital to sign off on this policy. But also, last of all, the public sector bodies' accessibility regulations. Everybody thinks it's web, but there's some little things within that legislation which happens to say Microsoft Office product or Office file products. And that's where the legal part of the documents are covered off within that legislation. So Obviously, there's a legislative requirement, which as a government department, we are supposed to uphold to the highest possible standard. But of course, the data I was able to share with our senior leaders, that's heart-rending sometimes stories that some of our colleagues were saying, I couldn't do this role. And it wasn't because I'm not capable, it's because I couldn't actually access the form, the guidance, it wasn't accessible. And those stories from actual colleagues, real experiences, are very hard to ignore. And this is why doing your own surveys, doing your own research, getting your data is really critical for when you need to bring about change, because you can then evidence why it's needed. Hopefully that was answering your question, Alex.
Yes, that was great. Thank you. I think I've been able to convince work around the website, and I've kind of taken that on. But my next bite of the cherry is the internal documentation, because I think there's still that education around the. You mentioned about the productivity, the legislation, that all that. I don't think it's quite on their radar as much as it should be yet.
It's not, because web is such a huge focus of all accessibility. But as I said before, 90% of inaccessible websites will then have 90% of their content, downloadable content, forms, documents, guidance, won't be accessible either. So it's about raising that awareness. And I've found that if you focus on document accessibility first, because so many of the document accessibility principles translate to web, and it's a very easy way to understand problems. Once you get somebody, a senior leader, understanding the need for alt text, then they'll automatically understand that that's also a requirement for web. Descriptive links, logical sequence, properly coded buttons, color contrast, all of these things translate very neatly to web. So getting people to understand it in documents automatically begins that process of awareness for web, and actually makes people much more aware.
It's interesting you mentioned about color. We've had it recently where there's been some meetings, and the original document has all been very colorful, but the printouts they've given to attendees have been in black and white. And there's been that awkward minute. If you look at the blue chart, the line of the blue chart, oh, yours isn't in color. This is a bit awkward. So I've kind of got that in my back pocket to use when needed as a good example.
Absolutely. So again, it's a simple thing of providing another way. So you can use color to convey meaning, but you must provide another way to be able to discern that same information. And it could be as simple as providing numbers that will be read out by a screen reader, or could be red if you're unable to see red, or yellow and everything else. Or the text within the content actually says what it is and what it does and what the relationship is. Some of the things I get most often is you'll get dashboards with red, amber, green, indicating trend direction. I was guilty of it in my past when I was a performance manager 20 odd years ago, going, look, beautiful, this beautiful chart, this beautiful table tells you which direction you're going in. But now I know that would be absolutely awful for anybody who's colorblind or who uses a screen reader, because it tells them nothing. So the importance is text should tell the person what's happening. That's the key. And for providing an alternative way of conveying the same information. We see that also quite a lot with flowcharts or with process maps, where color and trend is all linked. So, you need to follow the yellow line to get to where you need to do that particular change process. And somebody's going, well, where's the yellow line? I can't see yellow, so which one's yellow? Or, as you said, it will be printed out, and then because they'll go, oh, we won't print it in color because of the cost, we'll print it in black and white. And of course, that means those lines are impossible. You'll also see it a lot in data that's produced. So data charts where you've got about 15 different data sets, and it's all trend lines, and they intersect and overlap. And sometimes they're very hard to differentiate between the two. Simplicity is everything. Getting your message across, especially with data, keep it simple. Focus them on the key data line that you actually want them to focus on, and only put 1, 2, or maybe 3 data lines on any chart, so they're easily distinguishable. And then, of course, the long description will help, the way you label it, and make sure your text within a chart is accessible. Quite often, most charts will have 9.5 point text size, because no one will change it. They'll just assume that that's okay. You have to go in and change your text font size in a chart manually, because the default size is terrible. So all these little things are really important. Sorry, I do waffle on. Hopefully, I answered your question.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Any other questions? Anything else people would like to know?
No questions per se, but there is yes, Scalar's got a question. The escape room looks wonderful. Was it hard to get the budget to make something so creative and informative, or was the buy-in already there?
Very simply, I did a basic version of the accessibility escape rooms in PowerPoint, and then I co-piloted the images, hence the tool. I used Copilot to design the images for me, and it produced the images, which became the background. And the key is obviously the backgrounds are just backgrounds. They aren't generally needed. We just describe each slide as we obviously went through and read out all the text, so it was fully accessible. So was it hard to produce? No. The hardest point is what you're trying to achieve with each accessibility escape room, what questions you want to ask, what distractor answers you want to put in to try and make sure they've actually learned and understood the accessibility aspect of each question. That's the key part of it. But of course, it's about testing it and making sure it actually works as an escape room. The hardest part was making sure the links went to the right places and make sure that the link for the correct answer went to the correct slide. And then obviously, if they got it wrong, they went all the way back to the beginning. And some of the accessibility escape rooms were hysterical to watch and also heartrending. When you saw a team that did really well and got to the last question and got it wrong and went all the way back to the beginning, and then they did it again, went all the way back to the beginning. There were teams out there that were so good, but then just tripped at the last hurdle. So it was a lot of fun.
Okay. There's also a follow-up comment from Kayla. It says, a fun example, Uno has added symbols to their cards to help with color blindness.
Symbols. Well, I see this quite a lot. So the way I look at anything is when I'm any kind of accessibility or anything else is what does one is the symbols generally known symbols. So an up arrow, a down arrow, two arrows pointing towards each other to indicate no change. But are you basing that fact on that somebody's going to be able to see the arrows and not see the trend direction of the lines? So they can see the trend direction of the line. Okay. If it's a chart, if it's a table of data and you add arrows, the arrows will need alternative text. And arrows, especially in Excel, or alternative text in Excel, is a major problem. It's not always read out properly. So images in Excel are a major problem, as are the use of arrows and everything else. They do not always translate very well when it comes to assistive software. So I would actually just put in, so if it's a table of data in Excel, I would actually just put in a column which says trend direction and in the word up, down, no change. That's the quickest way and the simplest way of actually doing it.
Yeah, and you're right in terms of context for documentation. Absolutely, I agree with you there. I think, but I just want Kayla to clarify. But this is with respect to Uno cards, the game
Yeah,
that we've got.
the card game. So previously I noticed that like there was a few cards that were blue or purple and it was hard to differentiate, but the latest versions of the game have a star or a triangle to differentiate between the colors. And I thought that was a nice addition as an accessibility passionate person. I was the only one at the table going, oh my gosh, there's symbols so you can tell the difference. But yeah, that was just my addition to the adding to print out things.
I naturally applied it to like data charts and everything else, which is of course sometimes my own fallibility where I get too focused on the accessibility. The only thing I would say to that is the word purple would actually probably be very useful.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, good.
So just putting the word purple on the card and then it's a text alternative.
That would be simple. Yes, that would be. And like you said, when you look at charts with drag ratings, we've started doing that as well, and we've started noticing more people do things like that, where along with the color code, you either put the text in the same field or you add a legend somewhere where you identify what that color and what that legend is. Thank you, Lucy.
I would generally always, with charts, I would always include either a link to the data table, which should be accessible, or have the data table within the product. So that's generally what I've always advised. So when I've built, I used to do a lot of the COVID data back in 2020. When we produced those dashboards, you had the charts at the top, but there was a direct link to the table of data at the bottom. So anybody could then access the data and go through the data table manually, but you still had your visual impact and a direct link to the data table so everyone could gain the same insight.
Okay, good. Right, I'm just going to quickly have a look. Do we have any more questions today?
Yeah, if I
Questions,
could
comments?
ask a question,
Yeah,
please, or
of course.
comment, sort of. So I work in DFE, Department for Education, and I know that you mentioned that you were going to be sharing this with some universities, which I think is fantastic. I also previously had worked at a local council, and what I found both there and here is that a lot of education documents are full of, JPEGs and clip art and all of that kind of thing, and even within schools in itself as a parent, the kind of newsletters that you get are just completely unreadable, and so difficult. And so sort of part of me is hoping that you widen that reach and it gets to other educational establishments, because there's a huge problem with documentation in
I'm absolutely
education.
keen. It's where the barrier, it's where the gap starts for disabled people. It starts in education and it gets wider by the time it reaches employment. So it's a huge issue. I'm a former chair of governors at a special educational needs school. I spent about 10 years being a school governor at special needs and a high deprivation school. So I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a huge issue. We do need to get further into education. We are working already with a number of councils as part of the document accessibility in the public sector LinkedIn group. And if you search for DAPS or document accessibility in the public sector, you can request to join that. We've got over 250 members, 130 organisations in the UK who have joined that group. We're going to be doing our first face-to-face event with Microsoft in Paddington in London this year, not next year, it's this year now. And we held quarterly meetings where we brief people on document accessibility in the public sector. And we do focus on education. We actively encourage universities, schools, local authorities to join that group, and we're trying to increase the reach. But we've got organisations from every part of the UK, Scottish Government, Welsh Government, Northern Ireland Government, councils and local authorities and universities. So we are doing everything we can to obviously share the best practice out there around document accessibility. But education for me is a major passion. Again, reason being obviously my time as a school governor and chair of governor. But you are right, it's just not good enough. And we do need to make sure all education materials and all education communications are accessible for all. And this is where we start to close that gap, which will then close the employment gap between disabled and non-disabled people.
That's fantastic. No, that's wonderful to hear. Thank you so much, John. Appreciate it.
Please do join our group, and we've got a call coming up in March, and we've got the face-to-face in May. You're more than welcome to register. It's free.
Okay, yeah, fantastic. If you can add that to that list, I know you mentioned you'd do a list. Yeah. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Lucy. Liz has also added a comment saying, I work at Twinkle Educational Resources, and we're on a mission to make all of our resources accessible, but it's a huge project. We have over 1 million resources.
Simple tip, if possible, if you can get, so if it's a web-based file store, you should be able to get data on which is the most downloaded product. So what I did when I first started is I found the top 10 products that were most downloaded, and I dealt with them first. And then I worked down that list in a priority order. So the most popular products, you can focus, get them accessible, the most highly used, work on that, work your way down the list, and then perhaps get a process where you get your colleagues who might have a disability or use assistive software to identify the documents that has the most problems for them. the ones that they use the most frequently, and I'd work on those lists and then work your way down. You're never going to be able to. We have 42 million documents, so the problem we've got this huge backlog of documents. So focus on the documents that are most used, the most highly downloaded, are causing the greatest barriers. Remember that if it's not part of a live process, it's not part of a live resource that's needed right now, you can probably park it. It only really needs to be made accessible if it becomes part of a live process again. But focus on your high download stuff if you can get access to that information. If you can't, maybe you should do a survey, ask your colleagues which is the most popular documents they use, get them to identify them for you, then work on it from that list.
That's great, thank you.
No worries.
Okay, good. Alex has just added a link in the chat to a LinkedIn group. I'm just going to look at what it is. Document accessibility in the public sector. That's the group on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I co-chair that, so feel free to request to be a member. It is obviously for the public sector, i.e. anybody who is government funded. So we're looking at obviously education, councils and everything else, but we are looking at setting up one which is just for document accessibility in general. So, but obviously our aim at this point in time is to make everything in the public sector accessible, because that's where the legislation is a requirement. In the private sector, there isn't legislative requirements, but there's moral requirements.
I agree. I agree with that statement completely. And that's one of those conversations that we've had even with individuals on the program, where we've all started to get to that place where saying this is the right thing to do. Let's just get more people involved so we're all aware of why we're doing it, and then it'll become easier and doesn't have to rely on just one person.
Indeed, absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. Let's see. Any more questions? Any comments? Would anyone else want to unmute themselves and ask a question directly instead of typing it because you just don't feel like it, or if it's not something you want to do? Because I know I'm like that sometimes.
Yeah, feel free.
There is something new. Oh, Charlotte says it's been really informative and interesting. Thank you. Thank you, Charlotte.
No problem. I have had a request from Dimple to do masterclasses in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. So if you are interested in that, I will actually do an hour and a half session on how to make Word documents accessible, how to do that with PowerPoint, and how to do that with Excel. So if that would be useful for you, then do let them know.
I can tell you now, some of them have already asked about this before, so you'll see comments coming in or acknowledgements coming in. There you go. See, because we've had a few conversations around this, and I know there are a lot of the not just the learners, even their managers, because we tend to try and get more people involved that'd be interested, so it'd be easier to fit that into process or build that into the process and workflows. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of takers, not just everyone that's here today.
No problem. As soon as I'm back off holiday, we'll get that into the diaries.
Absolutely. Glad to hear it. Okay. Lucy said, thank you so much, John. Okay, brilliant.
More than welcome.
And Charlotte said, I'd definitely be interested in masterclasses. Yes, please. No
problem. You can also find me on LinkedIn. So if you look for Jon O'Donnell on LinkedIn, you can always add me as a connection.
I'm going to put that link in the chat just in case. Link. Okay. Okay, brilliant. I think that covers everything in the chat. I don't see any more questions come through. Some of them say they're already connected to Charlotte. Charlotte's just said that I've already sent a connection on LinkedIn. So John, keep an eye out for that. And in the meantime, if any of you think of any further questions, please don't hesitate to email me. You can either reach out to myself or John directly, either on email or LinkedIn. We will pick it up and we will come back to you, because after this, I'll have a quick chat with John about resources to send you links to. And then if there's anything else, you can reach out to us after that. You will find, of course, a copy, well, essentially an edited version of the session to